welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing a pretty short, pretty low-key March wrap-up. March was by far my worst reading month that I've had in a while, or at least so far this year. I only finished 4 things in the month of March. I did start quite a few things and I either DNF'd or just haven't gotten through them yet. So I only have 4 books to talk about in today's wrap-up. And I really honestly don't even have that much to say about the books that I have to talk about today, because a couple weeks ago I posted a weekly reads and I touched on 3 of the 4 books that I finished this month. So I'm going to briefly touch on them again in this video, and then I will like fully review the 1 book that I haven't talked about yet, and then the video will be over. It's gonna be quick, short, sweet, to the point. I'm also gonna try to do this fairly quickly because my camera battery is probably going to die at some point because it has like 1 bar. So like I said, I finished 4 books this month. 3 of the 4 books were books that I listened to as audiobooks. 2 of the books I read were nonfiction. 1 was an adult mystery and the other was a YA contemporary, and I liked everything. I pretty much liked everything. I think I gave everything 4 stars. The very first book that I finished in the month of March was Finlay Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano, the first book in the Finlay Donovan series. I don't know how many books there are going to be. I think the author said she wants to do I think that the author has said she wants to do at least 4 or 5. I don't know for sure. Essentially, this book is about an author. Her name is Finlay Donovan, and she is having a meeting with her agent, I believe, in a Panera Bread one day when someone misunderstands her talking about the plot of her new book and thinks that she is actually a hitman. And so she is then hired to kill this woman's husband, and she gets involved in some serious shenanigans. It's like kind of funny and just a little bit like weird and quirky. It's definitely not a book that you would take too seriously. Like, you have to suspend your disbelief pretty far to even buy into the majority of the book, because literally anything you could think of that could happen in this mystery situation happens, and it's crazy. But it's a lot of fun. Like, it's a fast-paced read. The characters are really enjoyable, and I'm really looking forward to picking up more in the series. I do have the second book out from the library. I just picked it up a couple days ago, so I will probably be reading that in April. But yeah, it's really fun. I totally understand the hype for the series, and I am excited to read more. Next up, I finished Cultish by Amanda Montell, and I'm really not going to talk about this one too much because I've written a full review on Goodreads, which I will leave a link to down in the description. Essentially, this is a nonfiction book all about the place where cults and language meet. It's all about the language that we could perceive as cultish in various aspects of the world. It focuses on cults, but it also focuses on other things that could be perceived as cults, like MLMs and fitness gurus and things like that. And I found it very fascinating. I really enjoy nonfiction that I feel like I learned something from, and this one I felt like was a super educational read. I find cults incredibly fascinating, and I also find the language and I don't know, the psychology behind it all, I find it all very fascinating. And so kind of to delve a little bit deeper into that with this book was really interesting, and I definitely want to read more on the topic. It was really good. I would highly recommend it. It's super hyped right now. It just came out like at the end of 2021 and I enjoyed it a lot. I also would really recommend the audiobook. The other nonfiction audiobook that I listened to was called The Undocumented Americans by Carla Cornejo Villavicencio. This is all about the author's experience going around and interviewing undocumented immigrants in the United States and kind of putting their stories on paper. She herself is an undocumented American and she's on DACA, and so she kind of was inspired by the 2016 election and the possibility of DACA ending to go and seek out stories of people that were not even fortunate enough to be on DACA and who would probably suffer the most and have suffered the most in so many circumstances. I felt like this book balanced the personal side of things with sharing other people's stories really well. I really enjoyed that the author was not afraid to put herself into the book. She definitely focuses a lot on her own story as well as the stories of the people that she's interviewing. I felt that she very seamlessly connected her own experience with the experiences of the people that she was talking to and meeting throughout the course of her research. I just felt like it was an educational read and like an eye-opening read, because a lot of the things that she talks about in this book were things I never even thought of. Like how when natural disasters happen, or when just disasters in general happen, you get a body count. And a lot of times it may not be completely accurate because people that are undocumented aren't necessarily going to be included in that body count. She specifically focuses on like 9/11 and how a lot of undocumented Americans were like delivery boys, like bicycle delivery boys in and around the World Trade Center, and how many of those people are not even acknowledged as victims of the terrorist attack because they weren't documented Americans. I never even thought about that. She talks about how in Flint, when the water started becoming toxic and it started becoming known that the water was toxic, the undocumented community were the last to know and were probably the people getting the sickest because there wasn't anybody to tell them that, hey, the water's toxic, don't drink it. I found it to be eye-opening and I really enjoyed it. I do think the reason that I couldn't fully love it like I was hoping I would is because I listened to the audiobook, and while the author does narrate the audiobook herself and she puts a lot of herself into the audiobook, I kind of wish that I had at least had the physical book in front of me to look at and read along with, because I feel like some of the impact of the story might have been lost on me listening to the audiobook. I feel like reading it again, I'll get more out of it. Reading it physically, I will understand it better. So I do want to do that at some point, but I really enjoyed it. I would definitely recommend it. I had a really good time reading it because I felt like I was learning something the entire time. So would highly recommend. And finally, the last book that I read in the month of March, or rather the last book that I finished in the month of March, was Permanent Record by Mary H.K. Choi. This was on my 2022 TBR, my 5-star predictions. I am trying to read one of those books every single month, and so this was the one that I picked for March, and I really enjoyed this. So this follows a boy named Pablo who is kind of lost in life. He has very recently dropped out of NYU and he is just working at this like upscale bodega in New York City, and he doesn't really know what his goals are. He's in pretty severe debt, credit card debt, and he's also got some student loans that the collectors are trying to get him to pay back, and he's basically just ignoring it, and he doesn't really know what to do. And one night while he's working, a girl walks into the bodega and he quickly realizes that she is this famous pop singer, like former Disney Channel star, and they quickly form a friendship, and then it kind of blossoms into something more. Throughout the course of the book, he kind of has to figure out like what's going on with him, what is he doing, and where does their relationship stand, where does she fit into his life and where does he fit into hers. I really enjoyed this. I think that Mary H.K. Choi definitely excels at writing characters that are real and believable and relatable. I think that she doesn't really shy away from hard topics. She doesn't shy away from tackling things that a lot of people, especially in their like late teens, early 20s, suffer from. I also appreciate that her stories don't always have to be like these perfect happily ever after type of stories. Not to say that this isn't a happily ever after in its own right, but it may not be the happily ever after that the characters wanted or were expecting. It just was the right happily ever after for them. I haven't been loving YA contemporary lately. I've talked quite a bit about it recently, that it's not an age range and genre that I'm super compelled by anymore, and I very rarely enjoy the YA contemporary genre. But Mary H.K. Choi is like the one exception for me. I think that whatever she writes, I will continue to read it because I really enjoyed this. Pablo was a really strong main character. I really enjoyed the fact that he started out as one thing, and yeah, he grows as a person, but it takes a lot of like tough love for him to get to a good place in this book. And I also really enjoyed all the side characters. Leanna, the love interest. I also enjoyed all of Pablo's friends, his roommates, his family. I felt like it was a really strong cast of characters. I felt like it was a really strong story, and I really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, those are the 4 books that I read in the month of March. Like I said at the beginning, it was a pretty light reading month, only 4 things, but I really enjoyed everything that I read. Like, I really can't complain. Let me know down in the comments if you have read any of the books that I mentioned in this video and what you thought about them. Do you have similar or different opinions to me? I'd really love to know. Also, let me know some books that you read in the month of March, or maybe your favorite book that you read in March. I'd really love to know that as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you again very soon.